it like it is, bringing the community together and working for justice. Attorney Travis McConnell talks politics, trending news, and how you can make a difference. You're listening to We Trust Travis. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarina Fazan, a journalist, host, and producer. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the We Trust Travis podcast. Travis McConnell is a personal injury attorney with a huge passion for the community, and he has a lot of insight to share. So let's get to it. Hi, Travis.
Hey, Sarina. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, too. Now, tell us about this case that we're talking about today.
Yeah, so today we've got Gary Hickson Jr. He was involved in the case. I want to say thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
Had a bit of a drive today, I know.
Yep,
But
a little bit.
Gary used to work over at Port Hendry and was smashed by a steel plate while working as a metal worker and welder.
Yeah.
So
I can't even imagine. Oh my gosh.
he was just kind of filling in as that. He was actually running the plasma table was his main job.
Yeah, I ran the plasma table, but when they needed extra fitters or tackers or welders, they'd call me in.
So Gary, let's go back just a bit and explain exactly your job to us for those people who may not know this industry, and also when did this occur?
Well, it occurred back in November of 2015, and I just weld and put stuff together.
No, it's okay. We are on a podcast. That's what the podcasts are the best, you know?
I fit all the steel together once we get it cut out, and we repaired vessels and fixed them, and I ran the plasma table most of the time. But
what is a plasma table?
A plasma table is a machine that you just program what you want to cut into a steel plate. We'd get a 10 by 40 foot steel plate, and you just put in the program what you want cut, what parts you want cut for that boat, and it just push start and it just cuts the whole plate.
Wow. So your boss at the time, and this occurred in Tampa, Florida.
It did, yes.
In Tampa, Florida. So
right over the port.
Right over the port of Tampa, because you have listeners throughout the country. So I just wanted to give them, an idea of what city this is happening in. So then your boss asks you to do something that day.
Yeah, I worked the plasma table. They come over to me. They had a barge that was like a rush job. It needed to get done like right away. So they had asked me to go down there, and there was probably 15 different plates on the bottom of this barge getting welded up. And I was tasked with going under there and helping fit some of these plates up.
Wow. Okay. And so, but they asked you to actually lay on it?
No.
What did they ask you to do?
They asked us to go in and put the plates up to the bottom of the barge. We did a bunch of little ones, and the one I was working on was a 16 by 2 foot long doubler just to the bottom of the barge, cover up a couple holes that were in it. And we got up underneath there and was fitting it up in there.
Well, just so you guys know, it's amazing, the work that had to be done. So this is on a dry dock. So they lift the boat up, drain out all the water. And you're talking about 4 foot of space basically to work in. So you're down walking around.
Wow.
3 foot with a sandbag on top of it. Sometimes there's wood, just depending on what gets put on top.
So the smaller patches, they're 1 by 1. You just hold them up with a hand and weld them. But this one, obviously, there's a right way to do it, and then there was the way that they did it.
Yes, it was a rush job. It was something that needed to be done right then and there, so that they could drop it back in the water and get it back to the customer. And we were fitting the plate up to the bottom of the barge. The painting company at the time was actually smacking the side of the plate to get it up inside the dogs. Dogs are little Tetris pieces, as Travis explains it, holding the plate up. And then once you get it in place, you can put wedges in it, which pushes it tight.
So then...
And then when we got we slid it in the first set of dogs. We got the plate slid in the first set of dogs. We got to the second set of dogs, and they were too close together. So the guy who was actually helping me push the bow out of it had to go up from underneath it. They set the end on a 4x4, and I'd relax and just for a split second. And when the guy on the machine shifted off the end of the plate, the whole plate came down right on top of me.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
And then when it hit me, it buckled up and then came back down again a second time.
Gary, do you remember when that plate fell? Do you remember what was going through your head at the time?
No, I was in a lot of pain. And so it actually ended up fracturing my back in 3 different places and crushing my L5.
You're lucky to be here then.
Yeah.
Very lucky to be here.
I wasn't walking for a long time.
So Travis, now let's go to you. When the company asked Gary to take this step, at this moment the red flag goes up.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the appropriate way that you're supposed to do this. They should have backed it out, set it down, fixed the dogs, and done it the appropriate way. So dogs are like little, that Tetris piece that looks like a little over and down.
Mm-hmm.
And so you put one side on the bottom of the barge, and then you slide the plate in between 2 of them. So that one that, if they're too close, they should have set the plate down on the dock, and they should have fixed the dogs and done it the right way. You're supposed to slide it through there and hook on with winches or chains somehow to pull it through. Because when you have the dogs, then it can't fall on people like it fell on Gary. It's the whole point of having them. And then the winches or the wedges that he was talking about, that's what puts it up tight so you can actually weld it, because it's such a big plate. You need to be able to actually, you can't hold it with just your hands. So I mean, this steel plate was probably like 400 pounds.
Oh my goodness!
It was almost 600 pounds. It was 585 pounds.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! So
And
how
dropping from 4 feet on top of me, on my back.
Oh my gosh!
Being bent over at that, because you're already bent over. I'm not short.
Well, part of the problem is with a little bit of physics is with it being bent up, there's like built up energy with the bend, and so the recoil is actually even stronger than it would just be falling down. We had an engineer on the case that ended up assisting throughout the legal process, explaining how things went through and all that sort of stuff, and the way it should have been done, and the forces involved. And
well, some people are listening to this podcast and some people are watching it, on YouTube. And it is incredible, Gary, to see you sitting here today after hearing about this horrific incident that occurred. How did the 2 of you then get connected? How did you learn about Travis?
It was weird because I'd actually tried getting hold of another law firm at first, and they told me they didn't want to touch it. It was a federal case because longshoremen's a federal workman's comp. So my mom, my stepmother, she actually got his number from her friend, which he knows who she is. I don't know exactly, but we got his number. We called him up. He actually flew down the next day from Indiana. Came flip-flops and sat on the couch and sat there and talked to me.
How long after the incident did you get in touch with Travis?
It was about...
I think you were still in the hospital, weren't you?
No, it was...
No,
I
you were
just
home.
got home from the hospital. I had just got home from the hospital. They had released me. I was in the hospital for like a week and a half. And then after that, I had went home and trying to get back into the swing of things, trying to be able to get around the house. It just wasn't working, and knew it was going to be long term. And we ended up calling him. That's when we got a hold of him. So
Travis, tell us, firstly, what Gary said about, it's interesting that when you called the first attorney and they said they could not touch the case because of the federal connection.
yes.
Could you explain that? I mean, why would they say something like that?
So it's probably just an area they don't want to handle. Different areas have different areas that they will take. I mean, there's different types of lawyers, even though when you pass the bar, theoretically, you can do pretty much any sort of law. Lawyers specialize in certain areas, or they have focuses that they focus on. So I think the first lawyer was probably like a state workers' compensation lawyer in the state of Florida. But state of Florida workers' comp is not what would apply on this case, since it happened actually on a dry dock. It's the Longshore Harbor Workers Compensation
Maritime
Act,
laws.
which is a federal law. It's a separate law. It's actually
They got their own set of laws.
good for Gary. It's a slightly better law than the Florida
Uh-huh.
Workers Compensation law. There's slightly enhanced benefits. They both have ups and downs, but so there's different laws for different types of accidents. When you're hurt on the job, basically you have to go through workers' comp. But in this particular job, you have to go through longshore.
Got it. Okay, so an attorney's hopefully would help you figure out which avenue that you need to take that's best for your case. So you get the case through, and we always talk about it's who you know, it's referrals, and clearly what a great decision for you
Yes.
to get Travis.
Oh, he was great. He answered the phone anytime I called him, put it that way. I called him a lot.
That's why we trust Travis, right?
He still calls me.
Yeah, I still call him. Here it's been, I'm going on 3 years now.
Wow.
And I still call him.
Well, okay, so which is great. And that's the type of
Yes.
relationship, because this is an ongoing thing. This has affected your entire life.
Yes.
And I want to talk about the prognosis shortly. But going back to the case, so Travis, you get the phone call. You're in Indiana at this point. Why did what compelled you to get on that plane the very next day and fly down here?
I just always make a point to meet with clients early, face to face. It's important to me to actually meet them face to face, get to know them, let them know I'm here for them, give them my cell phone. That's what clients want. That's what they expect, I think. There's some firms that don't do that, but that's how we handle it.
So what were you thinking, which again makes you trustworthy, right? And someone that you want to work with. So what were you thinking when you heard about the case, and what was the immediate first steps you took?
The first step was to make sure and get him to a good doctor that's going to take care of him. So with longshore workers' compensation, you actually get to choose the doctors that you go to. State Florida workers' comp, the carrier, the insurance carrier gets to pick the doctors. Longshore sometimes will choose doctors, or they'll suggest doctors to go to, but it's actually the worker's right to choose which doctor they go to. So the first thing that we immediately thought of was like, all right, I need to find out where he's going and make sure that they're not sending him to a doctor that's like clearly biased on their side.
We ended up going to another doctor because this doctor wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing in the first place.
So that was line of business one, was to make sure he got good medical treatment.
And at this point, as Gary had mentioned, his back was fractured in 3 places, did you say?
Yes, It was 3 places.
So 3 places, his back is fractured.
Shoulder, leg, knee.
Yeah.
The knee never. Did you ever? The knee needed a surgery, but they never did it.
They still to this day won't touch it because of the RSD in my foot.
Oh, bless your heart.
And so,
Which that was the real, as bad as all the fractures and the multiple surgeries. Like you had 6 or 7
I
or
had
8.
8 surgeries altogether.
Yeah.
8 surgical procedures.
The RSD.
Tell people what RSD is in case they don't know.
It's reflex sympathetic dystrophy, and
You got
it's it could pretty much happen anywhere. And the bad thing about it is that it could be in this leg now, and in another couple of years I could have it in this foot. And it's just mine. They said if it was because I was actually talking about amputation, and so just so I could get back on my feet, and I was just tired, and so. But the doctors, I actually went through all the steps to get it amputated, and the last doctor to sign off on it, he's like, well, let's see where we're at in a couple of years, because he goes, with it being not from a foot injury, he goes, being from your back, he says, I could cut it off, and the next thing you know, we're going to be cutting the other leg off too. So he didn't want to touch it. He wanted to wait a couple of years, and kind of glad we did.
How scary that is. So scary that injury was also a direct result of that condition, and you could have lost not one foot but the other one as well. So going back to you, Travis, so you said the first thing you needed to get Gary evaluated by a great doctor.
Right.
So that happens, and then how do you tackle the case?
Well, I mean, we start to investigate who all's involved, the different players. So there's the longshore harbor worker and his employer, but then we start looking at, well, who are the other people that were involved potentially? We end up talking about the painting company. We end up talking about other contractors that were out there. And we realize that it's not just a longshore harbor worker case, but there are actually other people who are at fault for this happening. And so then they're liable in tort, or in negligence theory, in court, outside of the workers' comp. So workers' comp is taking care of things, but then we're also proceeding against these liable parties. And we file a lawsuit pretty shortly, I think.
Yeah.
So when you filed the lawsuit, how long did it, from the moment you filed, were there a lot of challenges to the lawsuit?
I was probably the biggest challenge.
Explain that. Explain that. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of times where I literally wanted to give up, and he pretty much talked me out of it. And I mean, even on the day of us settling with the company, I was still bound and determined I didn't want to do this, but he kept talking me through it.
Now, Gary, why did you want to give up? Was it just the emotional strain, or
Well,
what was it?
You got to go. I mean, I've always taken care of myself, always done everything myself, and then when you have to have somebody bathe you and, you know, pretty much do all the things that you do every day for you, even going to the bathroom, you know, you got your son helping you, you know, it's embarrassing for a grown man to go through.
So you're going through all this emotional and psychological.
It wasn't just the pain and stuff that I was dealing with, just all the emotional that goes along with it, you know, not knowing if I'm ever going to walk again, if I'm going to have to lay in this bed for the rest of my life. There's several times I wanted to give up.
And so Travis takes on the extra role, which he is very happy to
He's
do.
answered the phone for me 2:00 in the morning.
So he becomes therapist as well,
Yes.
lawyer and therapist. And I say that in the
Yes.
most wonderful
Yes.
way, saying that he's willing, you know, that this is what you want in an attorney as well, right?
I mean, there's the old attorney and counselor law, and they don't necessarily mean counselor in the way of a therapist, but sometimes that's the way it works out, especially with personal injury clients. There's their pain and the physical suffering that they're going through, but there's so much of the emotional that happens with chronic pain, especially to the level that his was with RSD. I mean, it's basically extreme pain that's disproportionate. I mean, like a wind would blow across his foot, and he would, you know, feel like somebody stabbing knives in his foot, sort of
Oh
thing.
my goodness.
Fire.
Couldn't wear socks, that sort of thing. And that just wears on you. But then I think the big thing too, especially with anybody, I think, is just the loss of your job, the loss of the ability to provide for your family. Like, you just feel like I've gone from being a provider to now I'm not able to do that. And it's such a huge emotional toll that it plays on people.
Do you find that a lot, then not just with Gary's case, but in personal injury cases, that this is something that you see a lot?
Yeah, it is. And then, I mean, even to a lesser degree, just the impact that people in car crashes, which is a lot of cases, is the loss of their car. Like you don't realize how much you're dependent upon your vehicle. Like, you need your car to get to work. You need your car to do this. And even the people just losing their car is so hard on them emotionally. It can destroy their lives in a way. But then you take that and then you add on top of it all the injuries and everything else too. And a severe injury case where you're not able to work and end up dragging out without much, you know, you have no revenue coming in a lot of the time.
I mean, there's so many layers. Back to Gary's case, though. So when you take it on and you file the lawsuit, how long did it take to finally get to a resolution? And was it one of those situations where you're taking on the big guys?
Yeah, I mean, so that's typically the way that it goes with personal injury, is you're taking on the big guys. Usually it's not necessarily about the defendant on the other side of the case, the people that you're suing. It's usually their insurance company. And the insurance companies are all, for the most part, large multi-million-dollar companies, if not billion-dollar companies, depending on which one you're talking about. So they definitely have deep pockets to try and fight off people. And they try to delay and deny and, you know, and diminish how much they have to pay. So it's always kind of a David and Goliath sort of fight. How long it took, I think it was around a couple of years, maybe just shy of 2 years. I mean, this happened in 2015, and I think it went to at least 17 or 18.
It went
maybe.
to 18.
Yeah, so a little over 2
September
years.
of 18.
Wow. So for all those years, you're waiting, going back and forth. And as you mentioned, oftentimes it can be a David and Goliath situation. So as an attorney, how do you fight those kind of cases? You just plug away, you put in your own research. You talk about it, Travis. How do you do it?
You have to outwork the other side, basically, is the way that you do it. So when you're on the plaintiff side of things, you have to do your diligence. You have to work and outwork the other side because they have the advantage, and you have to get out front, stay out front, and you know, run like hell and hope they don't catch up, sort of thing. So it also involves investing time and not just time, but resources. I mean, we hired an engineer, personal injury firms, my firm, and others will invest our money to obtain the resources that we need to fight the cases for you as well. There were, I think, a dozen different depositions that we had to take at around $200 a pop or more for paying the court reporter fees, transcript fees, all those sorts of things. So typically on a case where you're getting closer to trial, you may end up spending $10,000 to $20,000 just working the case up on behalf of a client in what's called legal costs, as opposed to lawyer fees. And so that's paying the people that need to be paid in order to prevail on a case. The court reporters, the filing fee in Florida is $400, in Indiana it's $200. To pay engineers, expert witnesses, to pay doctors to testify, who can end up charging pretty high hourly rates to do that because they don't like to testify. They'd rather just treat patients.
So let me ask you this. Here's Gary, though, and other clients as well, in a position where he loses his job. He's worried he may never be able to walk again. Oh, my goodness. And also fearing amputation. So money to him, he doesn't. So do lawyers take on those costs?
The good thing on Gary's case was, since he had the Longshore Workers' Compensation Act, workers' comp actually pays you your time out of work as a benefit of workers' comp. When you don't if you have a regular car crash, you're not going to get that necessarily, except in Florida we have personal injury protection where the first $10,000 you can make a wage claim for some of that, but a lot of it usually goes to the doctors, if not all of it, because they can also claim it. But when you're hurt on the job, they have to pay a percentage of your wage loss through the workers' comp or the Longshore Harbor. And so he was actually getting some wage coming in while the lawsuit was going on. But it's not the same as what you make, so there's still a shortfall, and it's tough. And you're not allowed to advance those actual direct losses to your client. You used to be able to, and then they changed the ethical rules where lawyers cannot directly give their clients money. It'd be considered a gift, and it's inappropriate.
So you could not give him anything, or you can't give.
You cannot advance costs for living expenses. It's not allowed under the professional rules of conduct. So what does happen sometimes on cases, I don't remember if we had to do this on his case or not, but there are companies that will offer settlement advances. It's kind of a loan, kind of not, because it's usually a much higher interest rate than a normal loan because they're non-recourse, meaning if you don't win the case, the client doesn't have to pay it back, which allows them to charge a higher interest rate. And it's basically contingent upon the case, and then they get paid. They have to be paid off when the case is worked out at the end, and that's something that some clients will do because they need the money. I always try and recommend clients don't do it unless you absolutely have to because the interest rate is so high. But for some people, they have no choice and they need to do that. Remember, did we have to do that on
we
yours?
had to do it.
Okay.
And how high could the interest rate be? Like, are we talking like 19, 20% or above?
I think I borrowed like 15 and had to pay 20 back.
So
that's not terrible.
Yeah.
But, like, I have one right now that I inherited from a different attorney that was on it in the beginning, and I think the client borrowed $3,000, and then the payoff is like $15,000.
Wow,
like
that's ridiculous,
crazy.
isn't it? That's crazy.
That has lagged over several years in their defense, but yeah.
But back to when you had to hire engineers, doctors, etc. Is Gary paying for that, or do the attorneys pay for that?
You're allowed to advance those costs. So you're allowed to advance the costs of the litigation. So those are costs that the lawyers are able to advance, and typically personal injury firms do. Mine almost always does on our personal injury cases. There's very few times that we wouldn't. We might ask a client to put a little bit of skin in the game if we think there's something going on where maybe they're just trying to exaggerate a little or something like that. Make sure that they're really taking it seriously. But so legal costs you're allowed to advance, but you can't advance cost for everyday ordinary living expenses. So
if for other clients out there, that's a very important question, though, correct, to ask an attorney?
Yeah, to make sure that they will advance the cost, because there's some lawyers that don't. So yeah, make sure and ask the person that you're interviewing, one, if they're a lawyer, and two, what's their fee, and what do they cover cost? What's their policy about cost? So, and then some lawyers too differ on policies about cost. Actually, I don't know. My office won't seek to collect cost if we lose a case. Some lawyers may. So you want to make sure, like, if you don't win the case, are you going to come after me for those costs?
So that's another very important question to ask, though, right off the bat. I would ask that. You should ask that. So Gary, your case is over,
Yes.
settled, but you still do feel that connection to Travis, and
Yes.
and you call him and you talk to him.
Yep.
Just
Yeah.
as we close out this podcast, tell me how important is it for you personally that to pick the right attorney to handle a case?
It was everything. I'm not only, I mean, he's become my friend, family, it's very important to get somebody that's going to be there and you're not just another case to him.
And what is your prognosis? You're doing well.
I'm doing real well.
He's walking.
I'm walking.
Last time I saw him, he was on crutches.
Wow.
I was still only on one leg, but I'm up running around the woods.
But you still have your RSD.
Yeah, I still have the RSD. I still have a lot of problems with my foot, a lot of problems with my back. There's not a day that goes by I don't hurt, but I've learned to live with it, and life's good.
And we congratulate you as well, because you are your own boss now. You have your business.
Yep.
You have your own business.
Yep. I started up my own business. Actually, December 1st was the first day of it, but I've been working for myself for the past couple of months.
So what is the lesson in all of this, Travis? I mean, I know we're so sorry, Gary, that you had to go through it, but what is the lesson in all of this?
I don't know. Persevere. Stick with it. There were so many calls that I got from, don't give up. I mean, Gary would call and, so the amputation wasn't even so much a treatment thing or like a risk. It was something that he wanted to cut his foot off because it hurt so bad. He thought it would solve the problem.
I literally sat in the garage with a chainsaw one time.
And we had to have him admitted.
It reminds me of a Grey's Anatomy episode that I just watched. Grey's Anatomy.
Yes.
That's
where I got it from.
You got the idea from that Grey's
Yes.
Anatomy episode where
Yeah.
the guy cuts off his foot.
Yes, that's where I was.
You are kidding.
That's where that day after I watched it that day, because I was laid up in the bed, I got in my wheelchair and went out there, and I laid out the visqueen in the garage, and I was getting the saw out, and next thing you know, I had the cops there coming to take me.
Oh my goodness. I cannot believe that this is why I love podcasts so much and conversations, just in general, that who would have imagined that I mentioned that I watched this Grey's Anatomy episode with the guy and his foot, and that's where you got the idea from.
That's where I got the idea from.
Shonda Rhimes is too good of a writer. I'll just say that.
I think
Well, we are glad you did.
Your girlfriend at the time found out and called me, and
Yes.
then I called someone.
Yeah.
Well,
we got him some emergency mental health treatment at that point.
Yeah.
because in the show's case,
But I told him, I said, look, if you really want to do this, we can talk about it, because there actually is. So RSD has no real good treatment, but there's been some doctors in the United Kingdom mostly where they've done a therapeutic amputation, where they cut the foot off in the hopes that it will stop the pain. But it's got to be done tricky. It's not done with a chainsaw in your garage. It's done with ketamine injections and drugs to make sure and block the pain, and obviously in a clean, sterile environment.
Yeah.
well, in the show, the guy did actually get his foot off, and they ended up amputating, but on an operating table. But we are glad that it did not get that far in your case, Gary. We are so happy to see you prospering and seeing you with your business and smiling and being here today. And Travis, of course, this is why we trust Travis. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on this episode.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
To learn more about Travis McConnell, head to travismclaw.com. Thank you for listening to We Trust Travis.